what we're looking at when we look at the allegory of the cave is we're looking here at an illustration that's been created to support a conversation that Socrates had with one of his students, Glaucon, right? So Glaucon is one of Socrates' students, and they're having a dialogue in the Socratic method, in which Socrates is putting forth questions, and Glaucon is agreeing with them as he understands the questions, right? Plato ends up writing down this conversation, and it's in one of the parts of his longer work, the Republic. So with the allegory of the cave, the first thing that we want to understand is what an allegory is, right? What is an allegory? Any of you? Do you know? Is it like an acquaintance of a word? You've heard it before, but you're relatively unfamiliar with what it means? Jose L, yes, it is a story. However, it is a very specific type of story. All right. An allegory is a story in which every element in the story is symbolic. Right? Yes, a hidden meaning. In the case of the allegory of the cave, it's actually the interpretations that you can bring to life and humanity and relationships through the allegory of the cave are as unique and as widely varied as those people who read it, right? Essentially, our worldviews, our backgrounds, our family structures, our experiences are going to lead us to understand the allegory of the cave and interpret it in very different ways, very subjective ways. Now, we can look at it and we'll be able to tell, or we'll be able to see in some interpretations how all of us, like those themes that we were talking about yesterday, how all of those might have some common element for us in our humanity, right? So the allegory is symbolic because every single element in it holds significance, right? So let's kind of look at an overview of the cave itself, right? So the story is that we've got a number of people shackled up against a wall in a cave, right? Don't look for loopholes, just assume that they've always been there. The cave is all that they know, and their only experience with the world around them is to watch the shadows on the wall in front of them. Now, we know that shadows are cast as a result of a light source. So in the cave, there is a light source. This is pre-electricity, so it would have been a fire. And between the light source and the wall of the cave are people walking back and forth holding icons, symbols, other things, right? Which are casting shadows for the people who are shackled in the cave. Now, the people who are shackled, because they don't have any other experience with life except for where they have always been and what's always been maintained, because they don't know anything about the cave around them, and especially beyond it, unfortunately, they think that the shadows on the wall are reality, right? That's their reality. It's their perception. They don't have anything beyond it to correct them or to reveal anything other than what they can see, right? So there are people walking back and forth, casting shadows on the wall in front of the prisoners. It's debatable, arguable. You can go back to the text to look and try to identify whether or not the people who are carrying those icons, symbols, and pictures that make the shadows, whether they know what they're doing to the people who are shackled. And that's honestly one way that we can change our interpretations, right? At one point, there's a person who's shackled who escapes, right? So this person leaves the cave, they walk across this path, they get out of the cave, and they are blinded by the sun, right? Which is a much greater source of light. They have left the cave. They have now expanded the limits of their experience, right? They've left the cave that they've always known. They now have a different reality, right? Their reality is now totally turned upside down. The person who escapes the cave wants to enlighten the other people who still remain, right? So this person returns and says to the people who are shackled, hey, guys, like, we have to get out of here. Like, there's a whole other thing outside the cave. We're in a cave, assuming they've got the language for something they didn't know existed previously. But this person tries to convince the other prisoners, those who are also shackled there, that they should leave, right? And those people who are still shackled think that that guy who escaped, that person who escaped, is gaslighting them, right? That this guy's crazy, right? That there's no way that there's anything beyond what we see right here. You have lost your mind. And what we find when we think about things like education, or we think about the conflict that we talked about yesterday, the differences between wisdom and intelligence, right? How intelligence in this situation limits those who are shackled only to the shadows they can see, right? But wisdom comes in with that when one of those people has an experience that allows them to see a greater perspective. And the coolest thing about this text is how flexible we can take these interpretations and assign symbolism to each of the elements in order to better understand our own situations. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that humans are generally egotistical and very selfish, right? When we look at this, we imagine that we are the ones who have escaped from the cave. Now that we know whatever it is, we can't unknow it again, right? This person who's left the cave can now never go back to the perspective of believing that shadows are reality, because this person has newer, better, more accurate insight, because they've had an experience that proves to them otherwise. So once you know, you can't unknow, and we imagine ourselves in many ways to be the person who escaped. But that's not the way relationships work, right? You might feel like you are the protagonist in your own story, but when you think about it, you're really just a supporting character in the lives and stories of other people, right? And in some people's stories, you're just an extra in the background, right? So when we think about this, if we apply this to ourselves, it only stands to reason that we would be able to apply this to other people and other relationships and realize that there might even be ways in which we are not just the ones who are shackled, but we're some of the ones who are manipulating the reality of others, whose job it is to cast the shadows and keep people in the dark, right? Now, we also know that shadows cannot exist outside of a light source. Right? If you don't have a light source, if there's literally zero source of light, you don't have shadows, you've got a dark room. You've got a room that's pitch black, right? Now that creates its own problems. But we also know that there's a reality that a light source is actually one way of remembering that there's hope when we feel like we're living in the shadows, right? That we can't feel like that without recognizing that there's also some source of light. There's got to be something there that's casting the shadows, even if it's a single candle or it's a burning blaze. For example, in what way might this cave fully represent parental expectations. Consider that. Right? If we look at this cave as symbolic of parental representation or parental expectations, some of you probably feel like you're shackled by things that you don't want for yourself, but that other people do. Right? And at some point, maybe your parents are the people in your life who have high expectations, or you have expectations for how your life is supposed to turn out. You know, those might be the people carrying the icons, right? And the source of light might be their words and their persuasion and their arguments and their belief that they have your best interest in mind, that kind of cast the shadows in front of you that you look at, and you have to decide for yourself whether those are real for you or whether those are just real for them, right? Not everybody escapes from the cave of parental expectations. Think about that. We will pick up with this after lunch.